Great games on lesser known systems. I'm not talking about Nintendo or Sony, I'm talking about games and game systems that are much less well known, and in this episode I'm looking at Aquales on the Sharp X68000. The X68000, X68K or X68000 Hassan, if you're going for authenticity, was a beast of a machine released only in Japan in 1987. It was, at the time, arguably the most powerful game system you could buy. The original model powered by a 10MHz version of the Motorola 68000 processor, hence the unwieldy name. Its specs were closer to arcade machines of the time than other home computers, with 16-bit colour high-resolution graphics and FM sound synthesis backed up by a megabyte of RAM and no less than 2 floppy drives as standard. Sadly, with great power comes great price, and this thing retailed at the equivalent of around £2,500 or about $3,000, and you can more or less double that to give you the price in today's money. Now, if you'd laid out the cost of a slightly used Nissan Sunny to get hold of one of these things back in the late 80s, you might be expecting great things, and well, for the most part, this would deliver, at least when it came to games. A ton of great titles were released for this system, both in terms of gameplay and graphical prowess, with, unusually for a Japanese computer, a whole load of action games, many of which are still very accessible for Western gamers, including a good number of arcade conversions, many perfect or near perfect, and some perhaps even better than the original. Best of all though, are the many excellent system exclusives that the platform boasts, none of which of course would ever see the light of day outside of Japan. One of the real standouts of these exclusives has to be Aquales, or maybe Aquales, however you say it. It is of course the Latin word for water jugs or wash basins. It also means watery, more appropriately, as this is a slide-scrolling run-and-gun platformer with a bit of a nautical theme. Set across 8 fairly generously sized levels, you play a bloke in a mech suit on a mission to save the world from something at the bottom of the sea. What? I'm not entirely sure. The opening crawl is in English, but the rest of the game's dialogue is in Japanese, though this really isn't the type of game you play for the plot. Traversing the levels with the aid of a grappling hook, Bionic Commando style, and armed with a surprisingly large arsenal of weaponry, you'll face legions of pissed off robots and weird creatures of various kinds in a vast undersea complex. Huge detailed sprites and an array of visual effects, including masses of that 90s favourite, dizzying parallax scrolling coupled with a fantastic FM synthesised soundtrack, give this game a very arcade look and sound, with gameplay that for the most part backs it up. Starting the game with 3 weapons to choose from, in a menu accessible on the fly, you'll uncover more as the game goes on. Held permanently, once you've picked them up, they all have their own strengths and weaknesses in terms of their capabilities, and perhaps with a little inspiration from Mega Man, you'll find yourself switching between them regularly to find the best one for the job at hand. A bit of RPG style progression is added with a levelling system. Killing enemies rewards you with experience points and increased power as your character levels up. Thankfully, no grinding is required here, and it really just serves as a bonus for clearing out enemies and exploring the levels. And well, what levels they are. This is where the game really shines. Full of great ideas, the boss fight in a bottomless pit and the runaway minecart section being 2 particular highlights, but every level has something fresh in it and a lot of secrets to find. If I have any real criticism of this game, it's the fact that it's a bit uneven. It was made by a very small team, and at times it shows. Whilst much of the game has the wow factor in spades, some parts are perhaps a bit of an anticlimax. A few of the boss fights don't feel quite as epic as I'd really like, especially as the levels preceding them are often so darn good. The difficulty varies wildly too, at times being frustratingly hard, and at others perhaps disappointingly straightforward. The controls too aren't always entirely on point either, a bit temperamental at times, some platforming sections requiring just a bit more precision in the jumping and grappling than what they really give you. Still, none of these things are anywhere near enough to ruin what is, all in, a really great game. Superb looking and fun to play, this is a game with a lot of soul that can easily stand alongside the best of its contemporaries. If you are looking to play this game on the original hardware, well, it's not going to be cheap. You won't need quite as deep pockets as you would back in 1987, but still, these systems go for a lot. There do seem to be a few of these available for sale out there outside of Japan these days, so postage may not be as much of a factor, but you'll still be laying out several hundred if you want a working example. The game itself is, guess what, rare and hard to find too, and with no sort of re-release, remake or remaster that I'm aware of, this may be another one that you'll want to try in an emulator.